Actress Diane Keaton has died in California. She was 79 years old. Keaton's family made the announcement but did not specify a cause.
The world adored her laughter, her charm, and her fearless honesty. But behind Diane Keaton's timeless smile hid a secret battle no one saw coming. In her final days, something happened inside her quiet Brentwood home that stunned even those closest to her.
People magazine reports Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton has died. Keaton shot to fame in 1972, starring in The Godfather. She also collaborated with Woody Allen in Annie Hall, which earned her an Academy Award.
What really took the life of Hollywood's most beloved icon? The truth, as it unfolds, will leave you speechless. The final curtain falls. On the quiet morning of October 11th, 2025, the world lost one of its brightest stars. Diane Keaton, the Oscar-winning actress who gave her heart and humor to generations, passed away peacefully at her home in Brentwood, California. She was 79 years old. The news arrived just after 8:08 a.m. when the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to a call from her residence. Paramedics tried to help, but when they arrived, it was already too late. Her family released a brief statement confirming her death and asked for privacy in their time of grief. It was a quiet ending for a woman who had lived a life full of brilliance, laughter, and courage. The world paused, trying to take in the loss of a legend whose warmth had touched every screen she ever graced. Those close to Diane shared that her health had declined suddenly in the months before her death. Friends noticed that she had grown noticeably thinner and weaker, yet she never allowed illness to change her spirit. She remained her usual witty self, often cracking jokes during her last days and comforting others instead of letting them worry for her. She was funny right up until the end, one close friend said. Even in fragility, she carried the same spark that once lit up Hollywood. Around the same time, she quietly put her 5-bedroom Los Angeles home up for sale. Some say she did it because she wanted to simplify her life, while others believe it was a sign that she knew her time was near. Whatever the reason, her home reflected her soul, simple, beautiful, and filled with stories. When the news of her passing broke, tributes flooded in from every corner of the world. Actors, directors, and fans filled social media with photos, memories, and heartfelt words. Meryl Streep called her a light in every room. Al Pacino, her longtime friend and one-time love, wrote that she was his heart's quiet mirror. Hollywood Boulevard became a sea of flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. But before the world fell in love with Diane Keaton, there was a lonely little girl who grew up in silence, and that silence would one day define her destiny. The girl who grew up in silence. Diane Keaton entered the world as Diane Hall on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, a city that worshipped perfection. From her earliest days, she was surrounded by the golden glow of Hollywood dreams, yet her childhood was filled with quiet restraint rather than excitement. Her father, Jack Hall, worked as a civil engineer, a man who believed in order and control. Her mother, Dorothy Diane Keaton Hall, was once full of artistic ambition, a beauty pageant winner who had dreamed of a life on stage. But marriage and motherhood clipped her wings. Inside the Hall home, feelings were rarely spoken. Everyone smiled when guests visited, but behind closed doors, silence ruled. Diane once admitted that her family didn't talk about emotions. We simply lived inside them. This invisible rule shaped her deeply. While other children played carefree, Diane watched her mother's spark fade a little more each year. The once vibrant woman who had worn a crown and dreamed of applause now spent her days behind the kitchen counter, smiling out of habit. Watching that quiet surrender left a permanent mark on Diane. In her heart, she made a promise. I will not live my mother's life. She saw how easily dreams could disappear and vowed never to let that happen to her. But even with that promise, she often felt trapped in a world where being perfect mattered more than being real. As a teenager, Diane struggled with bulimia, an eating disorder she later called sick and creepy in her memoirs. It was her way of trying to fit into a world obsessed with appearance. Each smile she gave in public hid a storm inside. She wanted to be accepted, yet she longed to break free from expectations that suffocated her. School became both a challenge and a sanctuary. Her grades were average, but her heart came alive on stage. Acting allowed her to say everything she could not say at home. When she performed, she wasn't the quiet daughter or the awkward girl hiding pain. She became someone fearless, someone free. Teachers noticed her natural intensity, and classmates found her strange but unforgettable. By the mid-1960s, Diane decided that her life in Los Angeles could no longer contain her spirit. After finishing at Santa Ana College, she studied briefly at Orange Coast College, where she continued to explore theater. But soon she realized she needed more than classrooms. The world she longed for was not in suburban California, but across the country, in New York City, where real actors fought for their place under the lights. When she finally left home, she dropped her father's surname and chose her mother's maiden name, becoming Diane Keaton. It was both rebellion and tribute. Every time someone said Miss Keaton, it was as if she was giving her mother's lost dreams a second life. That choice marked the beginning of her transformation. The girl who grew up in silence was ready to face a city that never slept. She left behind the safety of home and silence, but New York would demand more than she ever could have imagined. The cold streets of New York. In 1966, a 20-year-old Diane Keaton stepped off a Greyhound bus in New York City, carrying little more than a suitcase, 2 scripts, and a heart full of fragile hope. She had no family waiting for her, no powerful friends to help her find her footing, and barely enough money to survive. But she carried something far greater than comfort, an unshakable belief that she was meant for something extraordinary. New York in the late 1960s was both beautiful and cruel. The air was thick with ambition, cigarette smoke, and the sound of dreams either breaking or being born. Diane found a small, run-down apartment on the Upper West Side, its radiator barely working and the wallpaper peeling off the walls. The nights were bitterly cold, and sometimes she fell asleep wearing her coat, her breath fogging against the window. By day, she stood in endless audition lines, her nerves hidden beneath her quiet determination. The rooms were crowded, the competition fierce. Casting directors told her she was too tall or too unusual. Every rejection stung, but she never let it destroy her spirit. Instead, she waited tables in small diners and sang in smoky basement clubs to afford another week of rent. There were nights when she had only tea and half a slice of bread for dinner. When bills piled up, she pawned her shoes or skipped meals just to keep her dream alive. But through every hardship, she clung to her goal with fierce devotion. As she later said, "Fear became my engine." It was fear that kept her moving, fear of becoming invisible, and fear of losing the purpose that had carried her across the country. Her persistence slowly began to pay off. In 1968, Diane earned a role in the original Broadway production of Hair, a show that captured the rebellious soul of her generation. Her voice, trembling yet powerful, caught the attention of theater audiences. She stood out not because she tried to be perfect, but because she was real. On stage, her vulnerability became her strength, and her authenticity began to shine. Her growing reputation soon led her toward film. In 1972, she was cast as Kay Adams in The Godfather. The role marked the beginning of her rise in Hollywood and introduced her to a world she had once only dreamed about. But before fame came recognition, there was struggle. The city had taught her how to survive, how to transform fear into art, and how to turn loneliness into power. It was in those cold New York nights that Diane Keaton stopped being the frightened girl from Los Angeles and became an artist who understood that truth and pain often walk hand in hand. She arrived as a fragile outsider, yet the roles she would claim next would demand every piece of her strength and break her all the same. The rise and the shadow. After her unforgettable performance as Kay Adams in The Godfather, Diane Keaton's talent caught the attention of directors and audiences alike. That same year, she began a remarkable creative partnership with Woody Allen, a collaboration that would define a major part of her career. Together, they created some of the most memorable comedies of the decade, beginning with Play It Again, Sam in 1972, followed by Sleeper in 1973, and Love and Death in 1975. Each film revealed her gift for blending humor with emotional depth. She was funny, awkward, brilliant, and entirely herself. Audiences fell in love with her honesty on screen. Then came 1977, the year that changed everything. Annie Hall was released, and with it, Diane became a symbol of intelligence and charm. Her character was quirky yet deeply relatable, a woman both vulnerable and independent. The film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Actress for Diane Keaton. When she walked on stage to receive her Oscar, she seemed shy but radiant, her wide smile capturing the hearts of millions. For a moment, it looked as if she had found everything she had ever dreamed of. But even as the applause grew louder, Diane began to feel something unsettling within herself. Fame, she realized, was not the answer to her restlessness. Success filled her days, but not her heart. She later confessed that, "Success gave me permission to be broken in public." Behind the smiles and achievements, there was an emptiness that no award could erase. She continued to shine on screen, reprising her role as Kay Adams in The Godfather Part 2 in 1974 and later in Part 3 in 1990. She earned more Oscar nominations for her stunning performances in Reds, Marvin's Room, and Something's Gotta Give. Each role carried traces of her own life, complex, wounded, and real. By the mid-1980s, Diane began stepping back from the constant noise of Hollywood. She wanted to rediscover what truly mattered to her. In 1987, she directed Heaven, a thought-provoking documentary that explored what people believe about the afterlife. It was a deeply personal project, revealing her spiritual curiosity and her search for meaning beyond fame. As years passed, Diane became more selective about her work. She no longer chased roles for recognition, but for honesty. Every character she played reflected pieces of her own truth. She was learning that greatness is not about standing in the spotlight, but about standing in peace with oneself. Her fame had reached its peak, but behind the curtain of success, a storm of the heart was waiting to be revealed. One that would change her life forever. The love that never ended. It began quietly, on the set of The Godfather. Diane Keaton was 25, bright-eyed and full of nervous energy. Al Pacino was 31, mysterious, intense, and already showing signs of the brilliance that would make him a legend. The moment they met, there was a spark that neither of them could explain. On screen, they played Kay and Michael, a couple torn between love and power. Off-screen, something deeper began to form, a connection built on curiosity, admiration, and quiet understanding. Their romance truly began during the filming of The Godfather Part 2 in 1974. Away from the cameras, Diane and Al shared long conversations and gentle laughter that only grew into something stronger. They were two artists caught in the whirlwind of fame. Yet in each other, they found a rare sense of calm. Diane once said she was crazy about him from the start. They were opposites in many ways. She was open and expressive. He was private and guarded. Yet, that difference made their bond even more magnetic. For nearly 15 years, their relationship moved through moments of closeness and distance. They loved deeply, but often drifted apart, pulled by their demanding careers and conflicting needs. Diane's heart longed for something lasting, something certain. Al, though devoted, was terrified of being tied down. Their love was real, but it existed in a space between longing and fear. By the time they reunited for The Godfather Part 3 in 1990, Diane had reached a point where she needed answers. She reportedly gave him an ultimatum: "Marry me, or I leave." The silence that followed was his answer. Al Pacino, unable to give what she needed most, watched her walk away. It was a heartbreak that lingered for both of them. Years later, Al admitted that Diane was the love of his life, a confession that revealed how deeply she had stayed with him. Diane, too, reflected on their time together, saying she had worked hard to make it last, but finally understood it was never meant to be perfect. Their creative chemistry continued to live on in their performances, a reminder of what once was. But even heartbreak wasn't done with her, because life was about to take from her the one man who had always been her anchor, the breaking point and rebirth. After the emotional storm that followed The Godfather Part 3, Diane Keaton stepped away from the noise of fame and retreated into herself. Her father's passing left a silence she had never known before, and that grief, layered over the heartbreak of lost love, changed her completely. For a time, she disappeared from the spotlight. She needed to breathe again, to find out who she was when the cameras were no longer rolling. In those quiet years, Diane began to rebuild her life, piece by piece. She turned her focus inward, exploring what truly mattered to her. She filled her days with reading, journaling, and long walks, learning that healing did not come quickly, but arrived gently, like sunlight after rain. She later said that she had spent so much of her life trying to be chosen by others, and now she wanted to choose herself. By the mid-1990s, something beautiful began to grow from that stillness. In 1996, at the age of 50, Diane adopted her first child, a baby girl she named Dexter. 5 years later, in 2001, she welcomed her son Duke into the world through adoption. Motherhood arrived as a second chance, a quiet miracle that filled the empty spaces in her heart. She once said that her children saved her because they gave her life new meaning and a reason to wake up smiling each morning. Being a mother humbled her. It taught her patience and showed her that love could exist without expectation. The woman who once feared loneliness now found joy in simple moments, packing school lunches, taking family walks, and listening to laughter fill her home. Fame no longer mattered as much as the sound of her children's voices. Diane also used this time to strengthen her spirit. She had battled bulimia for years, but through therapy and self-reflection, she learned to let go of the guilt that had followed her since youth. She grew stronger, not just as an artist, but as a person. She had learned to rise from pain and shape beauty from loss, but as calm returned to her world, fate was preparing to test her once more in ways she never saw coming. The quiet house and the eternal light. In her final years, Diane Keaton's health began to decline in ways that those close to her could no longer ignore. Though she remained graceful in private, the changes were visible. Friends described how she had grown noticeably thinner, her once vibrant energy replaced by a quiet fatigue. Her health began to deteriorate more noticeably by early 2024. She often stayed at home, spending hours in her garden, tending to her flowers and writing in her journals. Some said she looked tired but peaceful, as though she had come to terms with the natural rhythm of life. She canceled a few public appearances, something rare for her, and quietly withdrew from Hollywood events. When asked about her absence, her friends simply said she was resting and taking time for herself. Despite her frailty, Diane's creativity never stopped. In late 2024, she surprised fans by recording a soft holiday song titled "First Christmas." It was her final artistic offering to the world, tender and full of emotion. Those who heard it described it as bittersweet, a farewell wrapped in melody. It was clear that even as her body weakened, her spirit continued to burn with the same warmth that had always made her so loved. By the autumn of 2025, her health declined rapidly. She began spending more time at her Brentwood home, often writing by the window or sitting quietly in her garden. On October 11, 2025, she passed away peacefully in her favorite chair, sunlight spilling across the room. In the end, Diane Keaton faced death the same way she faced life, with grace, humor, and the quiet courage that made her unforgettable. What are your thoughts on Diane Keaton's final years and the strength she showed till the very end? Share your feelings in the comments below.